This text number 41, as you can see, is the concluding remark from Narad Muni as he is responding to the question that was asked in the first chapter of the seventh canto by Yudhishthira Maharaj. So let's try to understand what was the question that is actually driving all these chapters, reaching up to chapter number 10. So in the first chapter, Maharaj Parikshit asked Shukadev Goswami about the neutrality of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, because he was curious to find out whether the Supreme Lord only favors the demigods and he's always inimical towards the demons. So how is he actually neutral? So in order to respond, Shukadev Goswami relates the discussion between Maharaj Yudhishthir and Narad Muni. And just after Shishupal gained liberation, after his head got chopped off by Krishna's Sudarshan Chakra, and therefore you have to keep this in mind, that this is the larger context of the discussion that happened about Prahlad Maharaj. And therefore Shukadev Goswami narrated to Maharaj Parikshit about Shishupal's previous births as Ravana and Hiraṇyākṣipu. So in other words, Krishna shows his kindness even while he killed the cruel Hiraṇyākṣipu, while Hiraṇyākṣipu had become a threat to the life of his dearmost devotee Prahlad. And therefore chapters 2nd through 10 of this canto, 7th canto, there is this whole narrations of the interactions between the demoniac king Hiraṇyākṣipu and the pure devotee Prahlad Maharaj. So now in this particular set of verses, like 35 onward, Shukadev Goswami traces the history of Hiraṇyākṣipu, going back to the being a doorkeeper of the Vaikuntha Loka and how he fell to the material world. Now, of course, that was narrated already in the third canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, that there were the two doorkeepers, Jaya and Vijaya, who were forced to act as the enemy of the Supreme Lord for 3 lifetimes, appearing as Hiraṇyākṣa and Hiraṇyakashipu. Then the second lifetime, Kumbhakarna and the Shanan, Ravana. And then in the third birth, they became Dantavakra and Shishupal. And in each of these 3 births, Jaya and Vijaya left their bodies upon killed by the hands of the Supreme Lord. And therefore, every time they got the opportunity to become the greatest meditator of the Supreme Lord, although the meditation was directed in an inimical way. And therefore, in the purport number 38, Srila Prabhupada notes down the fortune of this intense focus that these demons had developed while maintaining animosity towards the Supreme Lord. So Prabhupada writes, acting like the Lord's enemy is also beneficial for the living entity. So this is, you can say, another way of looking at the neutrality of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It doesn't matter what kind of disposition one has, as long as one is able to always be absorbed in the Supreme Personality of Godhead, it's going to be ultimately beneficial. So kamad, dveshad, bhayat, snehad, whether in lusty desire, anger, fear, or envy of the Lord, somehow or other, yena kenaka prakarena mana Krishna niveshayat. Somehow or other, as recommended by Srila Rupa Goswami, tasmat kenapi upayana, one should become attached to the Supreme Personality of Godhead and ultimately achieve the goal of returning home back to Godhead. What then is to be said of one who is related to the Supreme Personality of Godhead as a servant, friend, father, mother, or conjugal lover? So clearly their position is much, much higher than all these other positions which are maintained by folks like, Shishupal, who is maintaining strong envy towards the Lord, or Kamsa, who is just always afraid of the Supreme Lord. Hiraṇyākṣipu is just filled with desire to rule over. So in this way, different ways, the living entities are absorbing their consciousness in the Supreme Lord. So therefore, Prabhupada is writing that what would be the status of those who are so favorably inclined to think about the Supreme Lord as a servant, friend, father, mother, or conjugal lover. So then Narad Muni speaks of this single-pointed attention in thoughts of Krishna. He's saying not only Shishupal and Dantavakra, but also many other kings who acted as enemies of Krishna attained salvation at the time of death. Because they thought of the Lord, they received spiritual bodies and forms the same as his. This is called Sarupya Mukti, right? Receiving spiritual bodies and forms the same as his. Just as worms captured by a black drone obtain the same type of body as the drone. By devotional service, pure devotees who incessantly think of the Supreme Personality of Godhead receive bodies similar to his. This is known as Sarupya Mukti. Although Shishupal, Dantavakra and other kings thought of Krishna as an enemy, they also achieved the same result. So we can also see here the goal of our meditation so wonderfully clarified. The goal of meditation is not to become one with the Supreme Lord, right? It is to still obtain a position in the spiritual world having the same kinds of bodies as the Supreme Lord. So Sarupya Mukti, as you can see, very clearly pointing out, it's about receiving bodies. But in this case, of course, spiritual bodies. So this misconception about what is liberation, really, like whether it is about, merging into the totality of existence and all these things, they are thoroughly debunked throughout the Srimad Bhagavatam as we go through different varieties of stories and anecdotes. So we have to kind of pay attention to these small things which are kind of clearly highlighting this point, like what does it mean by really getting liberated? So getting liberated meaning you are achieving a more intimate opportunity of service to the Supreme Lord. That's all that is to it. Liberation doesn't mean anything else. Right now we are entangled in the material world, only thinking about our own material comfort and maybe comforts of some extended relationships. But liberation is really to come out, really about coming out of these kind of entanglements within the material jurisdiction and think about how we can become a better servant of the Supreme Lord, how we can be more intimately associated with the Supreme Lord. And there was Sarupya Mukti is just one form of Mukti, but the point is still that how one can incessantly think of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So Prabhupada writes a beautiful purport, for purport number 40, where he lays down the path to Prema Bhakti in that purport. So Prabhupada writes in text number 40, purport, in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, in connection with Lord Chaitanya's instructions to Sanatana Goswami, it is explained that a devotee should externally execute his routine devotional service in a regular way, but should always inwardly think of the particular mellow in which he is attracted to the service of the Lord. This constant thought of the Lord makes the devotee eligible to return home back to Godhead. This is the mission of human life, returning home back to Godhead. Why? because this just gives us more intimate opportunity for service. That's all. This is what is liberation, nothing else. As stated in the Bhagavad Gita 4.9, Tyaktva deham punarjanma na eti mam eti. After giving up his body, a devotee does not again receive a material body, but goes back to Godhead and receives a spiritual body resembling those of the Lord's eternal associates, whose activities he followed. In other words, while we are doing our spiritual activities, it is it is not that the spiritual activities are on a particular track and after liberation it will become a totally different track altogether. No, while we are performing our spiritual activities, the mindsets that we are developing, it just gets carried forward. It's not like something else is going to happen. So while we are doing our sadhana, we have to call out that please engage me in your service while we are chanting the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. And that's what gets accentuated in the liberated state. And that's all it is. And therefore, Prabhupada's writing receives a spiritual body resembling those of the Lord's eternal associates whose activities he followed. However, the devotee likes to serve the Lord. He may constantly think of the Lord's associates, the cowherd boys, the gopis, the Lord's father and mother, his servants, and the trees, land, animals, plants, and water in the Lord's abode. Because of constantly thinking of these features, one acquires a transcendental position. Kings like Shishupal, Dantavakra, Kamsa, Paundraka, Narakasura, and Shalva, these are all a list of great demons, were all similarly delivered. And that is pretty significant that they were delivered in spite of the fact that they were greatest of demons. This is confirmed by Madhvacharya. Paundrake, Narake, Chaiva, Shalve, Kamse cha Rukmini, Avishtas tu Harer Bhaktas, Tad Bhaktya Harim Apire. Paundraka, Narakasura, Shalva, and Kamsa were all inimical towards the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but because all these kings constantly thought of him, they achieved the same liberation, and that is Sarupya Mukti. The Gyan Bhakta, the devotee who follows the path of Jnana, also attains the same destination. If even the enemies of the Lord achieve salvation by constantly thinking about the Lord, what is to be said of pure devotees who always engage in the Lord's service and who think of nothing but the Lord in every activity? And that is the key point that is coming out of today's section. So the next section, 42nd verse onwards, which is just a sort of like a review for Maharaj Yudhishthir, where 13 topics are mentioned that he covered while narrating the pastime of Lord Nrsingadev's killing Hiraṇyākṣipu. So it is more like a review of what has happened in the course of the narration. So we are inching closer and closer to the end, and as always there will be in the end benedictions for the readers who were paying attention to all these pastimes. So there will be always some phalastuti. So that's what we are headed towards. So 42, the verse number 42 onwards, it is summary and then followed by phalastuti. Thank you very much. We'll continue.